All right, welcome everybody to the Lakers Legacy podcast. Where need to scratch that itch? How about we need to scratch that switch? Because the Lakers' most popular defensive scheme this season needs to go. Anyways, it definitely feels kind of weird to be talking about sports right now as someone who lives right in the heart of LA, but at least one LA sports team took care of business last night. Unfortunately, it wasn't the Lakers, it was the Los Angeles Rams. So, bah for them and boo for the Lakers, but also yay for Michael Cooper. I'm your host, Jonathan Hernandez, and I'm joined by my co host, Tommy Alexander. Tommy, Happy New Year. Have you and your family managed to stay safe and okay and breathing clean air during this sort of devastating time with the SoCal fires aftermath? I mean, we hope there's not going to be any sort of reverberations from more wind, but so far it seems like we're in the clear. But how have you been in this new year?
Yeah, it's been crazy. I mean, personally, my place is pretty far south, so we haven't been directly impacted. I mean, the air quality was really bad for several days. It seems like that's slowly getting better. But my parents and my sister were both within a mile, I would say, of like evacuation zones at the peak of the fires from opposite sides of the city. I think that's the thing that like people don't who don't live in LA don't fully appreciate. Like the Palisades fire and the Eaton fire were so big, and they were probably like half an hour driving from one another, right? Like, or
Mhm.
maybe even more than that. That's how big LA is. So my parents and sister were, each sort of almost impacted, certainly scared and, having to deal with packing up and obviously their air quality was really bad. But to your point, yes, it does seem like things are slowing down. And so, there's some optimism, I guess, at this point.
Yeah, I actually live sort of near Tommy's parents' family,
That's right.
Tommy's parents. I actually live in the Hastings Ranch slash Pasadena Arcadia border, like right below Altadena, right below Sierra Madre, where the Eden Canyon fires were. So that first night, I could literally see the fires like right above us. We were just one zone away from the mandatory evacuation. And I think the only thing that saved us was literally the 210 freeway being in
Yeah.
between that overpass. But yeah, the air quality and the toxins from the ash and burnt houses was super bad. That we actually eventually retreated to your area over the weekend, Tommy. We went to Redondo Beach just to sort of like spare our lungs a bit, and yeah, luckily, unfortunately, we're back now, and the air quality seems a lot clearer. But I know there's still a lot of unseen particles in the air that are flying around, so we are still making sure to stay masked. But it is just such an eerie and bizarre time because it's January once again. The Lakers had postponed games, and people are masking up, so it feels very pandemic-ish. But yeah, obviously, our thoughts and well wishes go out to all those who have been displaced and lost their homes. It's crazy that JJ Redick literally lost his home and had to deal with the repercussions of all that the last week while preparing for games. And yeah, if you guys want to make a small monetary donation to the hundreds or maybe even thousands of people in Southern California who have been affected by these fires, check the link in the description box of our episode below. Um, I managed to get my hands on this like macro Google Doc list featuring GoFundMe pages for all different kinds of families. So you guys can check that out. But yeah, with that said, hopefully some mundane Lakers basketball talk where even just venting out our frustrations about the Lakers will help people gain some sense of solace and normalcy today. But yeah, so in today's episode, we are unfortunately going to talk about the Lakers' recent 3-game losing streak. Since the Dorian Finney-Smith trade, the Lakers are now 2-4. As I just mentioned, they've lost their last 3 in a row, and they have gotten blown out in each of the last 3 games versus the Texas teams. At some point in the game, they got blown out and were down by like 20 points. Um, the only Their only wins during this stretch have come against Portland, who's trying to tank, and the 19-19 Atlanta Hawks, who aren't even above 500. But before we get into the Lakers' very disappointing loss to the Spurs and mainly cover the how the Lakers have been doing in this new year in general. How about we start with something positive, Tommy? LA needs something positive. And let's start micro actually and talk about Dorian Finney-Smith first, because we haven't actually been able to pod about his actual gameplay since his acquisition. So yeah, what have your thoughts been on Dorian Finney-Smith in isolation? What have your thoughts been on his play in a vacuum? Unfortunately, he's listed as doubtful tomorrow due to personal reasons, so we hope everything's okay on his end. But with regards to the 6 games or so that we've seen of him, prior to last night's game, he had actually been starting to show an uptick in his offensive game. But yeah, so far, what have your thoughts been on Dorian Finney-Smith? Take it however way you want.
So I think so far everything has been as advertised. I think that's, all you can really ask for. When he is on the floor, there's a noticeable improvement to our defensive ability. I think, that mostly comes in situations where you get to watch him on an island against people. He really holds his own, and whether or not he is directly the one creating a turnover, it feels like, or a bad shot, it feels like he's in the mix when some sort of
Mhm.
turnover or bad shot is being created. And that's the type of, player that we're missing. And so, as advertised, I think we're getting everything there. The shot seems pretty good from the perimeter. He doesn't try to do too much on offense, but that said, like, I'm trying to think of a good example, but he's not like a guy who is completely incapable of putting the ball on the ground and attacking
No.
closeouts. He seems to have like decent instincts for when to do that.
Yeah.
I think he could be more aggressive with his shot, but I think that'll probably just come with time. He's still getting accustomed to his teammates and his role. And, frankly, I think he needs to be used in lineups that make a little bit more sense
Mhm.
for him. But, so far as advertised, and I'm, not disappointed. I think, ultimately it comes down to what we've discussed, I think, multiple times, which is we sort of traded skill sets, but we still traded one useful rotation player for another. And maybe the one that we acquired, is a harder sort of archetype to acquire. And so, you argue that that's why it's worth just getting that kind of trade done now. But net, who knows how much better we are? I mean, clearly we're not that much better, right? With
Yeah.
just that move, it's that's why folks I think said when that trade was made, this is step one. There's more trades to be made because I mean, intuitively, you can just look at that roster and sort of figure out like, okay, we've addressed some defensive gap that's sort of been there for a couple years, but there's obviously other holes created.
Yeah.
So overall, I think, still TBD how much of a win it was. I don't want to say if at all,
And
because I think because it's so hard to get someone like this, I think it's still a win, but in terms of our win-loss record, I guess how much of a win it'll be, it remains to be seen.
yeah, and we'll get into more macro talk on this team and the holes that it all of a sudden needs to plug in a little bit. But yeah, from Dorian Finney-Smith's end, to your point, I really like just how he does all the little things within a defensive scheme very well. His head is always on a swivel. His arms are always swiping, and he's a great help defender. His feet are always moving. Um, his 3-point shot has actually surprised me with how quick of a release he has. I
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I shouldn't be that surprised because he's had seasons where he's shot like 39%, hitting two threes a game. But over the last few games when he's been shooting more around like 45% from three, I'm like, oh, this dude gets it up quick and it's almost unblockable because he's so tall. And then to your point about him attacking closeouts, I've also been surprised by how kind of weirdly agile he is around the basket. He's been throwing up some reverse up and under layups, and I was like, oh, I didn't know he had that in his bag. So um, it's been interesting and sort of exciting, getting to know DFS as a player a little bit more. But the thing that I keep coming back to is just like his boring reliableness is refreshing. You kind of know what you're going to get with him. Um, you kind of brought this point up the first podcast that we did when we acquired him, but I really love his screening fundamentals and the way that he stands his ground and really tries to erase players on his screens that he sets. And he really knows how to use his physicality to rub defenders off and then pop out for open 3-point shots. And I kind of wish that more of our players on this team, including Rui Hachimura, would know how to set screens just like DFS. Now, the one
Yeah.
thing that I
And
wish
well,
DFS was better
can I
at
say, sorry,
was, yeah,
I
go
was
ahead.
just going to say one thing, sort of building on that point, and the intangibles. This team and this roster was, and I think kind of still is, lacking these types of. It's not that we don't have quality role players. I think what it was and sort of still is that we're lacking role players who will give you a consistent output at their level. Like we have a lot of high variance role players, you know what I mean? Like Rui Hachimura can go out and
Mhm.
drop 30 on any given like random night and hit like 7 threes, you know what I mean? But the what we lack are these guys who are just going to do this type of stuff, like set the good screens, engage defensively, and hit shots at their you know normal clip, whether they're getting one attempt or eight attempts in the game, right? And so DFS is like a nice solution there.
Yeah, no, totally. Now, the one thing that I wish he was better at would be his rebounding. He's a good offensive rebounder and corner crasher, but otherwise, I think his general rebounding is probably one of his biggest weaknesses defensively that keep him from being one of those top flight defenders. Because even a guy like Jared Vanderbilt averages like 8 rebounds or so and knows how to clean up after himself, even after guarding point of attack. But having said that, Dorian Finney-Smith has been as advertised, and yeah, it just sucks that currently like his contributions on the court are not necessarily translating into wins immediately. With that said, before we turn it to over to our sponsors and before we talk about the team as a whole, I also wanted to highlight one additional guy and point out one additional positive and silver lining of this last stretch for the Lakers. And I really quickly want to talk about Max Christie because over his last 10 games, Max Christie is somehow averaging 13 points on 50% from the field and 40% from three, hitting 2.1 threes a game. And I believe that includes his 4 of 14 shooting night last night. And it's crazy that I'm now saying Max Christie took 14 shots because that would have never been that would have never crossed my mind that he could ever do that about a month ago. But yeah, Max Christie has been the one real silver lining for the Lakers in this last stretch. He has become more competent offensively. He has made a lot better processing decisions when he does put the ball on the floor. He's turning the ball over less when he does do that. And I just feel like he's more comfortable knowing where his spots are on the floor and when to shoot. In a lot of ways, we just talked about DFS. We're starting to see the simplification of Max Christie's game and seeing him like become more comfortable in that DFS role from the shooting guard perspective. So, really quickly, your thoughts on Max Christie?
Yeah, I think Max has developed nicely. I mean, he went, and this is like a lesson and maybe not overreacting, right? But he went from early season, many people, including us, viewing as like like his $8 million per year contract is like, well, he's gonna have to grow into that to like, okay, this was very clearly already an overpay, and then like back to like it seems like he's growing into it, and then now like okay, now it feels like we have a bargain for what this guy's
Yep.
able to do at this age and this price. So props to Max. Like everyone on our team, I think he needs to improve his defensive consistency, but offensively, I mean, he's done everything you could ask of from him, cutting, using his athleticism in transition, hitting threes at a good clip. Yeah, I it's honestly been really, really, this is like one of the few bright spots of the whole season, frankly, is being able to watch his
Mhm.
development.
Yeah, it's crazy. He had like I believe within a 3 game stretch, like every single night within that stretch, he recorded a new career high in points. Now, his career high in points before the season was like 14, so it wasn't that hard, but he literally went from 17 points, 18 points, 28 points. So just to see Max's confidence on the offensive end has been yeah, really fun to watch. All right, before we take it to break, As I mentioned at the top, congratulations to the LA Rams for beating the Minnesota Vikings and advancing in the playoffs to face the Philadelphia Eagles, which is quite a conundrum for me because I'm also an Eagles fan, but I also want to see the Rams do well. Anyways, and speaking of the NFL playoffs, I just wanted to make sure that you guys all know that Underdog is the best place to cash in on all your takes during the NFL playoffs. Which players are going off and which ones are ice cold. With their pick'em game, you could win up to 1,000 times your money just by choosing higher or lower on your player's stats, i.e., yards, touchdowns, interceptions, and more. Think Puka Nakua will rack up higher than 75 yards against the Eagles next week during the playoffs? Well, cook up some fire entries for a shot to win real cash prizes all playoffs long. Create entries with all football picks or mix and match across your other favorite sports, like obviously basketball. Underdog is the only pick'em platform that puts the power to cash out in your hands. Now you can either keep riding with your entry or tap the win now button to cash out whenever you want. And as far as some Lakers props goes, I don't think the lines for tomorrow's game versus the Heat have come out yet, but I would be looking at taking the higher on whatever LeBron James points prop is. If it's 22 points, take the higher. He only had 18 points last game, and he'll be going up against his former team, the Miami Heat. So I think he's going to be pissed and revved up. So 21 points, 22.5 points. Take the higher on LeBron's points prop for tomorrow's Miami Heat game. So what are you waiting for? Underdog is the best play. So what are you waiting for? Underdog is the best place to play Pick'em. So download the app, sign up with promo code Legacy, and deposit now to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. That's promo code Legacy. Sign up and get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Must be 18 years or older, 19 years or older in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 years or older in Colorado for some games, 21 years or older in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado for some games. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467369. Go Rams. Let's take it to our sponsors, and we'll catch you guys after the break. All right, so we are back. Tommy, let's talk about Austin Reaves, and then you can bundle that up into talking about the Lakers as a whole. So prior to these last four or so games, Point Austin had looked like it had reached its absolute peak. And I was actually kind of surprised and was kind of telling myself, I think I was wrong on Austin's ceiling. Because Austin was legitimately diming the ball with pretty good vision. He had multiple games of double digit assists. I think he had like the longest streak of his NBA career with double digit assists. I think like 4 or 5 straight games with 10 plus assists. He was also dropping 20 plus points. So Austin, during the last week or so of December, was playing phenomenally. And he kind of, I don't know, validated the Lakers trading D'Angelo Russell away. And, you know, for someone like me who has been a D'Angelo Russell fan, and this is the D'Angelo Russell podcast, I was like, okay, maybe it makes sense if Austin is going to take this leap. However, in the last 4 games or so, Austin's kind of fallen back to earth, and I don't think it's a coincidence that he's fallen back to earth face with us facing more competitive, legitimate playoff teams. And so his Linsanity run kind of ground to a halt. He's starting to get picked on defensively every single time because teams know outside of LeBron James, he is now the primary ball handler. And in the last 4 games, look, he's still averaging 17.6 assists, but he's averaging 2.8 turnovers, which is kind of in line with what he's been averaging this season. But he's only been shooting 36% from the field. Now, there are a lot of factors to point to with regards to his recent downturn, including the competitive level of the teams that we're facing. But I also think one huge factor is the fact that we've kind of just been running Austin into the ground without another competent ball handler next to him. I mean, he was playing like 38 to 40 minutes a night and trying to handle the bulk of the offense while being placed in the blender defensively by the other team. And so, yeah, I mean, What are your thoughts on Austin Reaves, and do you think this is tenable? Because I think it's kind of shaking out to just be what we always thought, and this is not a knock on Austin, where I think two things can be true. I think Austin Reaves has improved as a playmaker, and in fact, I believe D'Angelo Russell playing alongside D'Angelo Russell has helped Austin Reaves' vision because the way that he runs these pick and pops with Anthony Davis now, it's very D'Angelo Russell like. I feel like he's learned from D'Angelo Russell how to perfectly make those bounce passes to Anthony Davis for the jump shot and whatnot, how to make the simple reads. So I think two things are true. Austin Reaves still has room to grow as a playmaker. At the same time, I don't think Point Austin moving forward is the long term solution to anywhere the Lakers want to go if they want to become a championship team. Because keep in mind, even during Austin Reeves' peak, during his hot stretch, Austin was putting up like 25 points and 12 assists, right? Which is crazy and impressive. But when you realize that he's also having to account for the loss of D'Angelo Russell's production and the production of two playmaking guards, then it starts to look less impressive if you have to split that production, that 12, 25, and 12 up in half. Because when D'Angelo Russell was here, Austin would still have games where he'd have 22 points and 6 assists. But D'Angelo Russell alongside him would also have a 15.6 assist game too, you know? So put those two together, and that's still better collectively than one 28 point 12 assist game with 4 turnovers from Austin. And I know it's not that black and white and not that simple. Other players are stepping up, but clearly from the last few games we've seen, they're not really stepping up in the way that they need to. And the loss of D'Angelo Russell has had an almost trickle down effect on the slotting of the rest of the players. We're starting to get sole Gabe Vincent at point guard lineups, Tommy, with no LeBron James and no Austin Reaves in the lineup. And it's just been disastrous to watch. Now, the defense and the switching has been another huge culprit for why the Lakers have been faltering recently. But since I already started us off on this track, talk to me about Austin and the loss of D'Lo, yada yada.
So I pretty much agree with everything you said. It's not surprising. It shouldn't be surprising. Austin struggles against playoff teams because most playoff teams are top 15 defenses, and any
Mm,
top 15 defense, I think what happened at first, I think this season was we noticed early in the season that teams were pressing us, and at first, without full context of everything we know now, it just sort of seemed like that strategy was, a sort of scouted strategy against us, get us out of our offense, get us out of those first passes that we want to make to like sort of initiate our sets, et cetera, et cetera. It's become clear now that full court pressing is like a league wide strategy, in order to sort of control pace. And most teams in the NBA are having at least their one of their guards, whether it's in the starting lineup or on the bench, press full court for most of the game. Um, Austin is not a true point guard. You can play him as a point guard with LeBron. He can get you 6 assists off the ball, in LeBron lineups. That's fine. But he's not, throw me out there and let me go one on one against Stephon Castle's full court press, and I'm going to be able to break that down and create positive looks. That should have been obvious, but I put Austin in the same bucket that I put a lot of our guys, especially our youngish guys, in this bucket of like guys that I feel like our front office and coaching staff just doesn't know what they want to do with these guys. Like
mm,
I think the thing that's tricky about Austin is his overall output, even in these games where he struggles, where his weaknesses are exposed, over the course of his season, his overall output is so good for how much he's being paid. But that doesn't mean you get to like ignore all the issues he has, right? And that doesn't mean that
mm,
like you can somehow just take, yeah, to your point, take D'Angelo Russell or a point guard of that caliber completely out of the rotation and expect that that output is just going to be replaced by like the people who are currently there. Now, maybe like, D'Lo leaving means Rui gets more shots, means Max gets more shots, like whatever. I mean, D'Lo isn't taking a ton of shots this year, but like maybe your scoring output that you lost comes from like those guys. But to your point, like the assists come from no one. And I how many takes did we see when this trade happened? Like that were like something to the effect of like, well, we initiate so much of the offense through AD at the corner of like as though like AD suddenly is Nikola Jokic, like running this complex offense with him at like the post, initiating all these sets. Like he happens to be the first one who catches the first pass in a lot of our sets because we like to quote unquote run our offense through him. But as I've said since the beginning of the season, like that's for him to be aggressive as a scorer, not for him to play make.
But also, how many of our role players have sort of suffered in D'Angelo Russell's absence? And I'm
Yeah, a
mainly
lot.
talking about guys like Jackson Hayes, Cam Reddish, Dalton Connect. Like they miss him.
Oh, they absolutely miss him because off the bench, we don't have anyone who can create shots. Again, it's like everything gets dumbed down. I don't know why on social media. Well, I do know why, but things get dumbed down on social media and it becomes this like, well, like people downplay, okay, D'Angelo has 12 and 5. There's so many box score watchers, I guess is what I'm getting at. And like if you actually watch the game, you saw the effect that D'Lo was having in those like bench lineups as the one guy on the floor who could do something with the ball. And when things would break down, D'Lo could run a screen and roll and get a shot for someone, and it almost always resulted in a decent look. Um,
Yeah.
and it's like a simple thing, and like you get these like keyboard warriors who are watching the box score chiming in with like, well, anyone could just do that, and like Gabe Vincent is like, he'll play more, and Shake Milton can fill some of the void, like as though like these are just numbers that we need someone to address, and not thinking about like the overall impact on the team's like flow of offense. And so we're seeing those problems, and some of this is just working out the kinks post trade, but
Mhm.
some of this is just like, this is why I mean, the first thing we said after the DFS trade was we need a primary initiator. Um, and that's the new gap that we created. And I just, the concern that I have is that the front office and the coaching staff seem to be trying to like more focused on trying to fit Austin into that hole than otherwise just addressing the hole with like somebody who's competent at those skills.
Mhm.
And that's problematic. So, I think Austin's a
Well,
really, really good player. I think, to your point, he's improved significantly as a playmaker. I but he's going to continue to struggle. I mean, he's shooting 36% because look at how much he takes like we take a solid 10 seconds just to cross half court and initiate our set. Like
yeah.
it's like we push it up, like the Stu is constantly commenting this on the broadcast, but like he's constantly saying things to the effect of like the Lakers are always running up against the clock. We're running up against the clock because Austin crosses half court at 16 left on the clock, and then we do like a pass that doesn't do anything at the half court that is just to initiate our set, and then like pretty soon we run one action and there's 6 seconds left on the clock and we have to like jack up a shot, and so like that is going to continue to happen as long as we continue to force Austin into these situations that he's just not comfortable with yet and may never be
Yeah.
comfortable with, right? And we saw the same story with him in college, and so I just don't know why we seem to be so focused on like trying to force this guy to be someone he isn't.
So, diverting the attention away from Austin now, segue us into talking about the defensive woes of this team, because I mean, we naturally assume, okay, we're going to see a dip in the Lakers' offensive game until they make another trade to address the new hole that they filled. Which again, this is to me, this kind of seems. I hope there's I know they're going to make another move just because they have some like flotsam to clear up, but I just hope it's a meaningful move because it's hard not to feel like the Lakers are just moving chairs around the Titanic right now with the DFS D'Lo move. Is that if that's where they keep it? And I know again they're going to make other moves. I just hope they're not just like small, let's save a little bit of money moves. And to me, it was still right to trade for a DFS type player, but not at the expense of an integral skill set to your team in terms of point guard play, where it just seems like we plugged up one hole, but then opened up another. And then I don't want to keep doing this. Like till the end of the trade deadline. But having said that, speak to me about the defense and the switching scheme that's killing us. And we just don't right now have the, I don't know, I feel like we have the collective size, but we also don't have the mobility with that size, or maybe the IQ with that size to competently execute it. And more importantly, we don't have the rebounders currently to help clean things up for us when we fall into those cross matches. Like a guy like Vando and Christian Wood would help a lot, actually, because they're the most competent rebounders on this team who aren't currently present. And I just mentioned at the top DFS's struggles with his defensive rebounding. So, talk to me about the defensive end and whether, I don't know, what is JJ doing?
So I don't know. I don't think he knows what he's doing. And that's like the problem, right? And I think I said this when we got DFS. I think the archetype for this team, or the identity, I guess is a better way of putting it, that's going to work for a LeBron AD team at this stage in their respective careers is, I'm fine creating holes on offense, but if we're going to create a, a one, a primary initiator hole, and two, like maybe a perimeter shooting hole with the loss of D'Lo, and like all these holes we're going to create on the offensive end, that's fine. But we need to be a top 5 defense in that case, and we're not, right?
Yep.
And part of that is
Nope.
making one trade for one elite defensive wing isn't going to save your team's defense. I mean, like the Jazz have arguably, a top 3 defensive big man in the entire league currently.
Mhm.
And they, are still a horrific defense because across the board, other than Walker Kessler, they're just not very good on the defensive end. And so it's like, it's a team sport. It should be obvious to everybody that just getting DFS is not going to like solve the problems by himself. So in terms of what we're doing defensively, this has been by far my biggest frustration with JJ Redick. I think, like in my industry, we get in, I'm a lawyer, and lawyers often get in a lot of stupid arguments about things that don't matter, as everyone knows, right? But one of the things,
Sounds like Lakers Twitter.
yeah, exactly. One of the things that, phrases that you'll commonly hear people raise when like you're arguing over an issue is like, this issue is academic, meaning that like we're talking about something that is theoretical that could technically happen based on these words on the page, but like is never going to happen in practice, for a variety of reasons. And I think JJ Redick's approach to defense is just academic. It's like in his ideal world with his ideal roster, the switch everything frenetic defense is what he thinks a real basketball team that's like operating in 2025 highest level of, scheme and all this and that should be doing. However, there's a few issues with that. One is it blatantly ignores the talent and lack of talent, I guess I should
Mhm.
say, defensively that our roster has. But two, it's just like so completely predictable. And teams are just like rubbing his nose in it. And he just like
Yeah, Chris Paul and
refuses.
Harrison Barnes. I mean,
I
last
mean,
night it
they
was
just
crazy.
do it over and over. And I mean, it's like, it's kind of like, a different version of what used to frustrate me so much with Darvin, which is like, if folks remember our complaints about Darvin last year, it's like Darvin's strategy most nights, which incidentally was much better overall than JJ's strategy is working defensively, was to like effectively do drop coverage, and like there's always going to be a 1 3-point shooter that you just decided as a team you're leaving this guy open. And that led to a lot of nights. I mean, famously, everybody remembers we were like one of the, I think, bottom 3 defense 3-point defense teams in the league last year.
The
Because
infamous Dante Exum game.
exactly, exactly. But there was plenty of games like that, right? It was like plenty of games where all of a sudden guys became like superstars shooting threes against us, because they were just standing there chucking wide open threes and making 8. And then everyone's saying that like, oh, everyone plays up to the Lakers, but it's like this is just like we're giving these guys wide open shots. So anyway, it's like we're kind of doing the same thing now. I mean, it's like everyone knows we want to switch everything, and they watch us switch everything, they expose it, and then they watch us continue to switch everything, and it's just not going to work, you know what I mean? And for some reason JJ seems to think that like again, I don't know. I don't know if it's like a academic exercise or like what he's doing. He thinks that like, I'm going to train these guys how to play in this system because one day we're going to acquire the guys that I want to acquire who are going to be able to do this properly. But in the short term and in the interim, while we wait for that to happen, if it ever does happen, like this is this is going to continue being exposed. And like we know that over a significant stretch, 7 games, I mean 8 games is like 10% of the season. This team was playing top 3 defense in the league, right?
Mhm.
But they're not going to be able to sustain that over 82 games with the talent level we have. It's like, I'm sure I'm trying to think. I'm sure the Wizards, you can point to like a 3 game stretch where like their net rating is pretty good. Like, why can you not just do that the entire season? Well, it's like you have to be able to sustain it, and we clearly don't have the talent to sustain this. And you mentioned the rebounding. I mean, if we're going to play the style that JJ wants us to play, we have to play bigger. And I mean, like, play 2 centers because, like, if AD is contesting every shot, you're playing 2 forwards next to him who don't really want to be involved in rebounding. I mean, LeBron will get the rebounds that sort of come to him. Occasionally, you see him crash the glass. Occasionally, he's triple double hunting or whatever. He'll have a big rebound game, but he often I mean, like, I go like it's so frustrating to I don't want to put myself through it, but look, that third quarter, end of the third quarter and fourth quarter against the Spurs, LeBron is just standing there like under the rim, like waiting for the ball to come to him, not making any
Yeah.
effort to box out or get his hands in the mix, and like sighing and throwing his hands up at everybody else. But he's 40 years old. Like, he's not at the stage of his career where he's going to crash the glass 100% of the time. Rui Hachimura has proven over and over that, like, yeah, okay, he's doubled his offensive rebounding output from last year, but his overall rebounding numbers are like largely unchanged from his career
Well,
averages.
the other thing about Rui too is that he's caught up in such a scramble mode defensively that his focus is I just need to stop this dude, which he doesn't do a good job of doing. And that's the problem with this switch scheme, right? Where it's like you get all these cross matches, and the other thing about AD, sometimes AD is at the top of the key because they had a switch, so he can't get the rebound.
Right.
So you're relying on all of these non-rebounders to get the rebound. So that's the problem.
Exactly. And it all gets back to the main point of like, it's like most teams in the league, and this is like part of what a lot of commentators talk about when they talk about like the quality of basketball is going down. Most teams just switch. Like, they're doing what JJ does and they indiscriminately switch. And so like the consequence of that is a lot of teams, like a lot of smart teams, have systems and sets that are designed to exploit switches, or you have like a point guard like Chris Paul who knows what he's doing and is going to like smartly exploit a switch over and over and over, and he's going to get exactly what he wants, and he is going to position the defensive players exactly where he wants to position them. So he's going to get AD to switch, get him on the perimeter. Doesn't even have to be like a direct screen and roll, like set a off screen, set a screen off the ball and get AD to switch that way. And then you come here and cause this switch. And then I throw it to Harrison Barnes, who's now isolated on Austin Reaves in the post, while AD is guarding some other dude in the corner, like 3. And that's, you are giving good players and good coaches the opportunity to just do this over and over and over. And for a guy who prides himself on like X's and O's and like, things of that nature, I just don't understand how JJ continues to allow it. And,
Yeah.
he'll make these comments post game like, I don't know what coverage that was. I've never seen that before. And it's like, you're the coach, dude. Like, your guys can't switch. It's halfway into the season. How have you not come up with like a backup?
Yeah.
Like, it's like it can't just be we switch everything or we play an ineffective zone that teams are just gonna
Yeah.
like shoot over the top of. It's like we need to have some sort of other coverage that is tailored to our personnel, and we just don't. And so that's why this is all part of the reason why I'm just like a strong advocate of, if we're just gonna like bury our heads in the sand and push forward on the path that we sort of committed to in the off season, which was clearly with switch everything, then like we just need to dump all of our players who are offense only, get defense only guys, and
Yeah.
just hope for the best. Like, hope we get some
Yeah.
sort of 2019-20 magic run where like our defense is so stout that like we score most of our, like, I think we led the league in transition points that year. Um, because like we were just causing so much havoc on defense and then using that to create transition and semi-transition opportunities to get our below par offensive players to be able to score some points. I mean, if
Yeah.
people remember 2019-20, it's crazy in hindsight with how things have changed with our roster, but the only no player on that team the entire season averaged double digits except for LeBron and AD. Kuzma was like 9 points a game or so. It's like some obscene thing like that, right? Or maybe one other
Yeah.
guy averaged like 10 points, but we had no, like, everybody's so concerned about who's going to score and who's going to be the third option, who's going to be the fourth option. That was not a concern in 2019-20. We just had LeBron and AD each scoring like 25, 26 a game, and everybody else was just like, get what you can get in transition. So some nights JaVale would just randomly score 12 or like, 14 because like he was just running and dunking and that's what we needed him to do. But the defense was so elite. It was like always enough scoring to win the game.
Yeah.
And so I feel like, to the extent I keep repeating this, I just feel like that's why we need to just go all in on defense because like whatever we're trying to do, we've tried drop coverage, we've tried switch everything, we've tried like the more complex schemes. I think that Frank Vogel ran a few years ago with his the last roster that we gave him, which was really not tailored to him, and like you know. It just feels like the results are going to keep being the same. We're going to be consistently mediocre or much worse. And in the case of this
Yeah.
season, most of this season, we've been one of the worst defensive teams in the league. Um, and so like, I just this is the end of my rant, but I just don't understand why, like how this keeps happening and how there doesn't seem to be any accountability or, suggestion of like, hey, JJ, like, do you think this team is so devoid of, defensive talent that you are like among Portland and Utah and Washington as like the worst defensive teams in the NBA? That seems wrong, right? And
Mhm.
for some reason nobody calls them out on that. And so like frankly it's amazing that we're still like 20 and 17 or whatever we are. Like it's like not a bad record for how poor we've been defensively relative to like how kind of mediocre we've been offensively too.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe by the All-Star break, the guys have gotten enough reps and they'll improve. I don't doubt that they'll improve, but will that improvement be enough for them to competently keep trotting this scheme out? I don't think so. But hey, Jared Vanderbilt may help in that respect, and he could be back as soon as next week. That's another silver lining. All right, with that said, there's still a month left till the trade deadline. I think the Lakers are going to have to sit tight for a little bit with this roster and see how things go. Internally, the best they can do is to kill the switch, literally. But yeah, with that said, that'll do it for this episode. Thank you guys for listening. Again, you can check out the episode description for the Google Docs link on GoFundMe pages for people who are currently struggling or may have lost their homes in the SoCal fires. But with that said, everybody stay safe, mask up if you go outside, and we will catch you guys next time, hopefully after the Lakers have won a game in 2025. With that said, Tommy, I will catch you later.
Peace.
See ya.